Do not cite the deep magic to me, which I was there when it was written. What are the best examples of this that you know of? My coworker, Jim, was delivering products to a company we work with often. The guy at the other company was complaining about the products and insisting Jim had made mistakes. He then pulls out a manual he had and starts walking Jim through it, explaining everything he did wrong. The manual was a step-by-step guide to the variety of products, complete with drawings and a bunch of pictures of a young man with a working on the parts. Jim finally stops the guy, points to one of the pictures and says, "Do you see that name tag on this guy? Jim? I am Jim. I wrote this manual 20 years ago. When I was in grad school, I wrote a Wikipedia article on a species I was co-authoring a paper on. I also did a class project in genetics on the same species, which wasn't related to the publication. I got fine marks on the class paper, but the professor chided me for not describing all the interesting things known about the species for background. He told me I could start by just reading the Wikipedia article. When my 13-year-old cousin asked if I even knew what a meme was. Like, look here you little fuck, I've been on the internet since Newgrounds, don't you dare talk to me about memes. When I was in college in the late 90s, I took a class in astrophysics for fun. The professor was extremely arrogant and often talked, over the top, about his educational background and experiences. One of my fellow students, can't recall his name, was an older, retired gentleman, who was taking the class for fun as part of a program where seniors, over the age of 65, could audit classes that interested them at no charge. At the time, NASA had a program where they would loan collections of items related to space exploration, memorabilia, and moon rocks, to universities. One of our lessons was on the items and we spoke heavily about the moon landings, specifically Aldrin. The professor spoke on things about the mission, the rocket, the lander, etc., and my fellow student began to say to him that some of the things that he was saying was not accurate. They argued back and forth for several minutes on different topics mainly involving the technical aspects of the mission until finally, the professor asked why my fellow student was so adamant about these things and his response was, "Because I'm the one that designed it," or something along those lines. We all just looked at him and the professor, not really sure about what was going to be said next. And before the professor could even say anything, my fellow student pulled out the textbook and opened to a page that had a picture of Aldrin and a series of the engineers and ground crew from Johnson Space Center. Sure enough, standing right there was the guy from my class. He had been an engineer for NASA for years. He was retired at that point and decided just to take the class to see what was new. It was great. I was training a new file clerk at my firm and I was explaining the system we have for checking out physical files and that we have asset tags with scannable barcodes that you have to scan after your ID badge to log who took the file and is ultimately responsible for it. She turns to me and says, "God, whoever came up with this is an anal retentive nightmare and all you need is a sign-out sheet." I just kinda stood there, because I developed this system after years of having to dig through attorneys' offices and hunt down important stuff because they ignored the sign-out sheet that was there when I got hired. Sigh. I work in software. I had a client during a meeting where they were beating up on my company's stress with absolute confidence that our software couldn't do some given thing. I gently let him know that it did do that. He literally shouted that it did not. He knows this software, he's been using it for the past 3 years and it has never done the thing. I immediately hit share on my screen, showed him the setting that turns it on, the setting whose name and description I wrote 8 years ago, turned it on, and clicked through all the buttons that I had personally designed in the given release in 2016 or whatever it was, and asked him if he had any questions. He did not unmute his microphone. When my kindergartner came home from school and asked me to spell I cup, I was talking to an old Navy vet. Like closing in on 100, World War II old. And my lil 13-year-old ass starts nerding out about Iowa-class battleships. He proceeds to get out a box full of manuals, reports, and various memorabilia. Turns out he was actually on the USS Iowa from her trials until the end of the war. I've been having a few of these lately. I'm an international trade attorney. My specialty is trade agreements and tariffs. My nephew, with all the condescension of a 6-year-old, there's this movie. You probably haven't heard of it. It's called Aladdin. Me, did you wake me up? Did you rub my lamp? I happened to be in the US in fall of '93, when Aladdin came out on tape. I'm 33. A 10-year-old mentioned Pikachu in conversation and then backtracked and started trying to explain what Pokemon is. I had a work meeting regarding a specific internet-based phone system. I was on the pilot team that tested it when it rolled out. When I got to the meeting I introduced myself as a system expert to the guy next to me. He just kind of grinned but didn't say anything to that. I asked him what his role was for the meeting. "Oh, I was the lead designer for the system," was his response. We both took it well and laughed about it. I hadn't played Magic, the gathering for decades and asked a friend's kid to teach me the new rules, no interrupts now? Including Commander. He gave me a simple control deck. I looked at my first hand and my old brain creaked awake. This card lets me draw an extra card every turn for 1 life, and I have 40 life? My old brain whispered card advantage to me and I proceeded to lock down the table. I was the head judge for the French National Championship in 1994 and judged the semi-final of the first World Championships. I was the first level 3 judge in Europe and worked for WAC UK from 1993 to 1998. I was literally there when the Deep Magic was written. When my 19-year-old colleague started discussing this new film franchise he'd found to me, 41F, and explained it used to be a TV show on something called MTV. The franchise he was talking about was Jackass. My teenaged kid, in 2005-ish, telling us I just found this cool new band. Sweet. Who? The Red Hot Chili Peppers. They just put out their first album. Boy, you were probably conceived to RHCP. People who are surprised that you have an email address with your name and no numbers. My kid tried to explain to me that you could make a smiley face by typing. My kids know I'm a gamer, but I trend towards RPGs. A decade ago my oldest was really into this new game he and his friends got for the Xbox, Street Fighter V. He had a bunch of friends over and they were doing the usual mid-teens trash talking and competitive one-upmanship when I came home from work. Hey Dad, we're having a tournament. You want to play? What game? Street Fighter? Yeah, I think I've heard of it. As in yeah, I played in SFI arcade tournaments back in the early 90s on a daily basis. I wasn't godlike, but I could hold my own with said godlike players most times. He and his friends proceed to bet me that if I win, they'll mow the yard and do yard work for a week. If I lose, I have to buy them pizza. You know what kids, there's a lot of characters, why don't you pick one for me? Oh, 6 attack buttons? Nah, I'll just use one, I'm old and my RSI is acting up, which one do I use? Oh, okay, this is the jab? Alright. I proceeded to annihilate each and every one of them. Didn't matter which character or which single button I was allowed to use. Bye Vitch, I've got that frame data tattooed in my DNA. Now go get on my lawn. It's been a standing tradition over the years for my kids to introduce their new friends to Dad by seeing if anyone can beat my Street Fighter 1 button blind character pick Kung Fu. Still undefeated. Edit, it's gratifying and awesome that this resonated with so many people and I've loved reading your own deep lore stories. My teenage son turned on Eminem in the car thinking it wasn't my style and I wouldn't pay attention and instead, I rapped along to every word of it. Then I told him if I ever heard him call a woman literally anything Eminem just said in the lyrics of that song, he was grounded until he turned 18. Earl, there was that job offer asking for 5 years of experience in some programming language. One of the creators of said language was refused the job, because he only had 1.5 years experience in the language, because it was only 1.5 years old. Edit, corrected timeframes to match reality. Unlike HR recruiters.